Okay, hold on, everyone. Let's bring up the text. All right, we're learning a Sicha connected to our times now, and that is because the verse that the Rebbe talks about in the Sicha that we're learning tonight is the name that the IDF and the government of Israel gave for the last campaign against Iran. And this is a verse from this week's parsha. It says, "Hein kalavi yakum uka'ari isnasa." Behold, the people that rise like a fearsome lion, raising itself like a lion. So the Rebbe says, "Parshas Hashavua in this week's parsha, it says, Hein there are people kalavi. Kalavi is like a young lion. Yakum uka'ari isnasa, and rising like a lion. So the difference between a levia and ari is a levia. Levia is also a female lion. This verse is connected to the times of Moshiach. The verse that says also they crouch, comes down like a lion, or like a young lioness who could lift him up. Nisbar b'sfadis Yud Beis Gimel Tammuz. The Rebbe says we talked about in the Farbrengen of that we just finished this week of Yud Beis and Yud Gimel Tammuz, the 12th and 13th of Tammuz, that Shemitzinu b'Medrash Beis Deyas. There's two opinions about these verses. So Kara Shachav Ka'ari, Kara is I think the English word is crouching down or lying down like a lion, Kalavia, like a lioness, Mikimenu, who could lift them up. And the verse we just read is also a similar idea. Hein am Kalavi, like a lioness, Yakum Ka'ari is Nasa, who is majestic. So the Rebbe quoted in Yud Beis Gimel Tammuz the medrash that says, "Mi peretz atzitkiyo." That his opinion is that this is talking about. This refers to the Jewish people at the time frame of Peretz. Peretz is the son of Judah. Atzitkiyo, till King Tzitkiyo, meaning till the destruction of the first temple. Shezehu Hazman Shal Geula, which was a time of redemption. Tzidkiyahu, the end of Tzidkiyahu was, I was just thinking about Tzidkiyahu, the end of Tzidkiyahu was the destruction of the first temple. And so from Peretz until Tzidkiyahu was the Geula, the times of redemption. And the second opinion is as the contrary. It's from Tzidkiyahu, means from the destruction of the first temple, Ad Melech Mashiach, until the times of Mashiach. So what the Medrash says, there's two opinions. What are we talking about? That the lion is lying down, the lioness is lying down. Is it a sign of Geula, a sign of Galus? So one opinion is it's talking about the time of redemption, which is from Peretz till Tzidkiyahu, which is the time of the judges, the times of the kings, till the destruction of the first temple. Second opinion is from Tzidkiyahu, from the destruction of the first temple. In that is included the whole second temple, because it wasn't on the level of the first temple, until the coming of Mashiach. Shezeh Zman HaGalus, which is the time of the exile. So it's a question of is the time of exile, time of Geula. Al Negela Pasuk there, the Rebbe spoke on Yud Beis Yud Gimel Tammuz that the pasuk that says later, which is in today's reading, the sixth reading, is referring to either Mashiach or the time of Galus, because it's talking about a lion that's lying down. Al Negela Pasuk Hein Am Kalavi Yakum, when it talks about the verse that they are like a lioness that stands up. Uka'ari Yisnasa, that's also from the word Yisnasa, is elevated. Harzeh Davar Apasha, the Rebbe said, this is obvious, it's clear. Shekaya Zman Gul. And not only is it talking about the time of redemption, it's talking about the future redemption, which is the time of Mashiach, which is the ultimate redemption, even more than the redemption in the time of the leaving of the exodus of Egypt all the way through the destruction of the first temple. L'chein nemar repasik zeh halashin hein am kalavi yakum ki hein kashrim achas. Hein is also connected to the idea of oneness. As it says in the tractate of Shabbos in the Talmud, that there's in biblical in Talmudic language, the hein is also one. And what's the oneness have to do with the times of Mashiach? Then in the future redemption, the whole world is going to see the Goy Echad Baritz, how the Jewish people are unique, are one people, are one nation in the earth, in the world. Ve'inyan zeh yeh lo rak mitzad bnei Yisrael. And this is not going to be just for the Jewish people to see. Even the nations. That we're not going to count in we're not going to reckon with the nations. Meaning to say, what's going to be this idea? The Rebbe in general, in Parshas Balak, I heard this is a talk that we're learning is 1956. I heard a talk from 1978 yesterday. The Rebbe also spoke about the idea the idea of the uniqueness of the Jewish people, the chosen people. So the Rebbe says because in the days of Moshiach, it's going to be it's going to be revealed the idea of Hashem Echad Shmo Echad. God is one and His name is one. What does it mean? The name of the people. How does God identify Himself? A name is an identification. How does God identify Himself? Is by the Jewish people. So if we're talking about in the days of Mashiach, God is going, Hashem Echad, God's going to be one, His name is going to be one, meaning we're going to see the oneness of the Jewish people, the uniqueness of the Jewish people amongst the nations. So the Rebbe says, Apiza Yuvan Haseidir Pasuk Zeh, that the Pasuk starts off, Kelavi Uka'ari, Tchia Leviyah V'achach Ari. There's a difference between a Leviyah, if I see the English translation over here. So here he says, the English translations, he puts it both line and line. But here, a Leviyah is a young lion, and an Ari is an adult lion. So he says, even a Seder Pasuk, that's what we'll understand the Pasuk, it says, Kalavi Ka'ari, Tchila Leviyah, and then Ari. Bizarre Isar, the Zohar teaches, hey Reb Shimon, Sha'ari ihu tekifa, Leviyah ihu tekifa yasir. I guess not. He says that a lion is strength, and a Leviyah is even stronger. And the Zohar says opposite, but the Baal Turim says. The Baal Turim also, of course, is a great, aside from being a halachic scholar, he wrote the Four Turim, which is the basis of the Shulchan Aruch. He also has an incredible pirush on the Torah, very mystical. So the Baal Turim says that the opposite, that the Leviyah is weaker and the Ari stronger. Seemingly, why would we, if the Zohar says the Leviyah represents more strength, and from there and the lion, the Ari, is weaker, then why we're supposed to go from weaker to strong? Why do we start with the Leviyah? The verse says, "Hein am Leviyah ka'ari mis nasa." We should go from easier to heavier. Tchila Ari v'achach Leviyah. I'm not sure why the Chabad translation translates it both line. I have to check quickly the Sefaria. So he says like this. Achini knew the idea like this. So like we said before, this verse of Hein am Kalavi, Hein am Kalavi Yakum v'Ka'ari Yisnasa, talking about the days of Mashiach. Azman Delasid. When we already finish all our job of engagement. What does engagement mean? The jobs that we do in this world in turning the material, the permissible, into holiness. That's the idea of this world. The idea of this world is the world of Birurim. We're here to Mevar, to elevate, to Masakin, to fix. Once Mashiach comes, there's no longer going to be that battle, the battle of engagement. The times of Mashiach, the spirit of impurity, of the non-pure, is going to be lifted up from the world. And everything is going to be obviously godliness. It means that everything is created from God's utterances. Everything is godly. But in the world, the way it's presented to us now, before Mashiach, there's work to be done to reveal the godliness, the Echad, the Hashem Echad in the world. Once Mashiach comes, it will be revealed already. The Rebbe says, he points out, we can find this idea of the days of the Mashiach in the Haftorah. Like it says, "V'hayisha Eris Yaakov, Ketal mi'es Hashem, kirvivim ali Esav, asher lo yikav li'ish v'lo yichal l'vnei Adam." So he says, "V'hayisha Eris Yaakov," the remains of Yaakov is going to be like Ketal, like the dew from Hashem, kirvivim ali Esav, like the rains on the grass, on the field. Asher lo yikav li'ish, there's going to be no more hope for man. L'yachal l'vnei Adam, you're not going to be looking. Means there's going to be no longer time where we have to come on to other people. There's a discourse. It doesn't say who says the mimer. But there's a Hasidic discourse that we don't have it in its complete form. We only have bullet points. Well, let's see 13. Could be this also. Looks like it's from the years Tafresh Samachtas, so it would be from the Rebbe Rashab. So there the Rebbe asks, the Rebbe Rashab asks, what's the chiddush? That in days of Mashiach, we're not going to be looking for hope. The yikav from the word tikva from people. Why does the Haftorah have to tell us? As if it's going to be so unique, the days of Mashiach, that no longer we're going to have to come on to hope towards people. I mean, come on to people that so others should help us. It's going to be obviously everything's going to be obvious from Hashem. So that's not unique to the times of Mashiach. There's a clear verse that says, "Cursed is the person that lays their trust in man." Al tivtechu b'nedivim. Don't even place your trust in the givers. From the word nediv, right? So even a person who's giving you is not supposed to put your trust in. So what's the chiddush that when Mashiach comes and be leikav leish? We're not going to be hopeful for others. So that's the question the Rebbe Rashab asks. So the Rebbe Rashab answers, I'm assuming it's the Rebbe Rashab. What does it mean that hope from people? From within yourself, the hope within yourself, the ish within yourself, that you're going out there and you're engaging in the world. No longer is our dependency going to be on our achievements of birurim, of engagement. Because the this battle of engagement, of birurim, of separation, of elevating the mundane to holiness comes. We draw our strength from the idea of God, the man of war, because that's a war, right? That's the whole point of the Tanya. The Tanya discusses the constant battle the person has with him or herself and with their engagement of the world, meaning the battle of the temptations of the world, of being brought down by the world or elevating the world. When the Mashiach comes, in the future, the time of the future, we're going to be living on a much higher level of awareness and avoda. It's going to be Ketal Mi'es Hashem. It's not going to be in a battle. Just like Tal, we know the difference between rain and dew is that rain comes from the mata. There's the environment affects the rain, whereas dew comes down on its own. When we talk about the brachas, for instance, Yaakov Esav wasn't required for avoda, therefore his bracha was tal. When Moshiach comes, it's going to be tal l'mal yusa, not going to be just a handout like Esav got. Esav says, "Give me yesh li rav," but it's going to be ketal mi'es Hashem. It's going to be we're going to reach the level of the tal of the dew, from a holy place. That the past, present, and future as one is going to be revealed in the presence of this world. And not only that, many of the Maimonides brought down that the idea that Mashiach comes, even the name of Havaya is going to be like Elokim. It's going to be Es Havaya, secondary. Everything is going to be nullified to the awareness of Havaya. That's much higher than engagement. Then in the times of Mashiach, it's not going to be the idea of hope in the Ish Muhammad. It's not going to be. We're not going to find we're not going to find avoda. We're not going to find purpose, meaning in life, in the battles of life. It's going to be another high level, a much higher level of revelation. And therefore, the Rebbe says it's going to start off with the Leviah, which I believe is the young lion, and then it's going to go on to the lion, the Ari. Again, he's quoting the Zohar. There's a difference in the Zohar and the Balturim. The Balturim says that we are going Mikal Kovid. The Levi is weaker and the lion is stronger. And the Zohar says the Levi is stronger and the Ari, they're both names for lions, is weaker. So here the Rebbe is quoting basing on the Zohar. When do you need to go? When do you need to strategize? Preserve your energy. Is when you're battling. You have to have a plan. So you have to go mikal, right? You have to start off with the present. You have to go from the weaker things till you can move on to the harder things. Right? You can't just start off your engagement with your full strength. You have to lead up to it. Not only that, you haven't revealed yet that strength within you. Why not? Because strength over here doesn't mean your inner strength. It means your strength to overpower. because the enemy is going to be also strong in the beginning. When do you start becoming more victorious? Is as the battle moves on and you weaken your enemy. As we continue in the battles, you're getting stronger and hopefully the enemy is getting weaker. There's different views on this idea, but we talk about the idea that the Yetzer Hara doesn't get weaker, but the principle generally is we're accomplishing more and more. The more ground you're accomplishing, the more you're turning the world into a holy place. But as we're getting to the end of the time of engagement, Yeshna Tchila HaToikif Delevia, the Iud Takifa Yasir. Sorry, when we complete the idea of the Birurim, no longer are we battling. So then we start with the full force of the Levi, according to the Zohar, the Iud Takifa Yasir, which is stronger. Because we're not battling. So in the transition moment, you're putting it's like it's the strategy, right? So if you know you're in for a long battle, you have to preserve your energy and build into strength. But if you have this last, get the football over the goal line, this is the last play of the game, so you're going to put all your effort into the last play. There's nothing to preserve. So you put your energy of the Lavi right away at the Gemar at the end of Birurim, and you could sail into the Ari, which is no longer the need for the strength. You got in there already. Because there's no longer the idea of the enemy. Like we know when it comes to Sukkot, that the sacrifices which are on Sukkot are specifically in correspondence to the nations, that they get lesser and lesser. The first so that's an idea of Moshiach, that first you bombard with all strength. And because you're at the end, so then you're getting ready. It's tailing down. In the strength of the Ari, which is weaker according to the Zohar, then the Lavi is enough to sail into the time of Mashiach. He won't rest until he eats his taref is from what he pulls apart. And he drinks the blood of his captures. Taref moira al bir nitzutzis. The idea of eating your taref, the things that you've torn away, like when a lion tears away at his food, is talking about the sparks. Shari misbar nitzutzis hu rapach. And so if you look at the word taref is made up of 3 letters, tes resh pei, that makes up 280. It says 289. And we know that there is how many nitzutzis, how many sparks are there that need to be elevated, and this is from the beginning of time, right? Rav, 202 of them we took care of in Egypt. The past 3,500 years we've been dealing with the remaining 86. So he says, Shari misbar nitzutzim hu rapach is 200, reish is 200, pei is 80, 288, ches is 8. Rapachim hakoilel begematria teref. There's a rule when it comes to gematrias. Gematrias means the number value, when you match up number values. So there's the concept of the kolel. The kolel is, some people will say that's that extra, that gives you a little leeway in that extra number. But the idea of the kolel, it's not a mocking concept. The kolel is that extra number, because there's the details and there's the all-inclusive concept. The all-inclusive is the kolel, is the thing that includes all the numbers. So once you've completed something, so there's that extra number, which is the 289. Now, what does it mean? There's no longer going to be the blood. There's going to be nullification of the idea of a man who spills the blood of man. What does this mean mystically? Not just no more killing. Of course, there will be no more killing as well. But the idea of the person of l'umazah, the person of the opposite, the negative forces will no longer spill the blood of holiness. Is explained in the Kultei Torah that even because Moshiach comes, there's going to be nothing left. There's going to be no longer that the forces of opposition are no longer going to be opposite to spill the blood of holiness. Therefore, in times of Mashiach, the Rebbe says, it's a very mystical Sicha. The Rebbe is saying that we're learning 2 things from the Sicha, right? The Moshiach comes, it's going to start off kalavi, like the Zohar says, that last final push of force, and going into the lighter, to the Ari of Yisnasa, of elevation. The this is mamish like we're beholding in our time in these days. At last, all the forces that we have to go against is that Levi. We need to reach into the young lion and within us that's going to be able to get us past these last difficulties until Moshiach comes. That's the first talk the Rebbe said in that year, 1956. Sif Daled, the Rebbe continues. Before that verse Bilam talks about in his praise of the Jewish people, he says, Kלביא יקום, before he says the idea of they're like a people of a lion who has to lift up and a lion, like he says it's a later lion, is going to be misnasa, elevated. So he has the verse that says, Ke'es yomer liYaakov, we're going to say to Jacob, L'Yisrael ma pal kel, and to Israel we're going to say what has been the effect of God, meaning lefnei aguda ase tachsan nevu L'Yisrael. The Rebbe says it's brought down before Moshiach comes. Prophecy is going to come back to the Jewish people. Yomer liYaakov is going to be what for Yaakov to say. L'Yisrael ma pal kel. Israel is going to tell how God is being poil, how God's being effective in the world, which means that prophecy. What's the source of this? 26. The source of this is, all right. The Rebbe goes into details here, but the idea is that the prophecy will come back to the Jewish people before the time of redemption. Isir Bishalmi, the Talmud Yishalmi says, Al pasuk Eis Yom Yaakov, Bilam Amru B'chatzi Yom of Shalaylam. When did Bilam say what he said? So the Yishalmi says he said it at the midpoint of creation, meaning the midpoint of man's existence on this world. Rambam Kosev Echad, what year is that? I have to check. What year would it have been? 3,300. What was it? What is it now? 3,300 years from Matan Torah, so maybe 3,340, around 3,350. That's 3,350, 7,000, 3,000, 6,000. No, sorry, we're 3,300 years behind. So it's 2,000 and something years from creation. So at that point was the midpoint, which basically is around our time, or a little earlier than our time. Is it Rambam Kaisev Echad Migaraisav? There's a famous letter from the Rambam, Maimonides, called a Geras Teiman, right? Nothing comes out of chance. The famous letter is a letter to Yemen. Bilam Amr Zayis B'Shnas Beis Alafim. Oh, so where's the Rambam says exactly what year did Bilam say the prophecy? In the year, if I'm talking about the Jewish calendar of counting of creation, 2,488. So in the year 2,488 is when Bilam said that there's going to be prophecy in the Jewish people. So if you double that, he said ke'es, if you take another 2,488, which makes it 4,800, 900, and excuse my math, 88 is 160, 960, 970, 992, if I think I'm 92 or 90, 98, something. I have to check the math in a second. So it's obviously passed already. Is he says Dal Lafim 4,000 Tuf Kuf Ayin Vav. So it's 4,576 Tachsan Nevu B'Yisrael. The prophecy will come back to the Jewish people. Now we're 5,585. So it's a while ago that the Rambam writes that in the letter of Teman that prophecy will be returned to the Jewish people. Which is Dal Dalafim Taf Kuf Ayin Vav. Who was around those years? We're talking about almost 1,000 years, over 1,000 years. We're talking about Taf is Taf Kuf Ayin Vav. So 4,000. We're holding now 5,000. Yeah, so it's over 1,000 years ago. Is Rabbi Shmuel Hanavi Aviv Shel Rabbi Yehuda Chassid, who was in those days a great sage called Shmuel the prophet, who was the father of the famous Rabbi Yehuda Chassid. Rabbi Yehuda Chassid, till today, he's instituted the takanas of Rabbi Yehuda Chassid. Till today, things that are not understood, that Jewish people worldwide practice, the takanas of Yehuda Chassid. For instance, not polishing your shoes before you go on a trip, not marrying, not closing up the windows of the house, not returning to the house once you leave on a trip, There's the famous takanas of Rabbi Yehuda Chassid, and his father was called Shmuel Hanavi, and also lived in those times Rebbe Lezer Bar HaRekeach, the Ramban, Nachmanides, Shechiber Kama Sifra Kabbalah, and all these are people that were authors of hidden secrets of Torah, the Kabbalistic teachings of Torah. We know that the Ramban, it's known, was a great Kabbalist. The Rambam, the Rebbe also says, was a Kabbalist, but he was very careful not to reveal Kabbalah. He as though he was a great Kabbalist, to find Kabbalah in the writings of the Rambam, the Maimonides, you have to check very carefully. With the Nachmanides, Ramban was more open with his Kabbalistic teachings. And we have in the writing of the Arizal, which of course lived many years later. It says, I believe he's referring to the Ramban, that the Ramban was one of the authorities of Kabbalah, that the Ari HaKadosh, Ari HaChai, always relied on the Ramban. Sorry, Shehu Echadam Kabbalah Mechidim Shtemchem Aleim Haravid, that the Ravid would rely on. She says that there was open Ruach HaKodesh, Spirit of Holiness, which is a sign, a kind of level of prophecy in the Beis Medrash over there. Of Reb Ezra Hanavi, Reb Yehuda Chassid, Shalav Nemar, She'ilu Hoyi B'mei HaMoirim Hoya Moira, Ilu Hoyi B'mei HaTanoim Hoya Tanav, Ilu Hoyi B'mei HaNavim Hoya Navi. So we're talking about in those years that the Rambam says that prophecy is going to return to the Jewish people. Basically, there were great sages, that so much so that even if they lived in the times of the prophets, there would be a level of prophet, even though usually we say there's a concept of Yeridus Adaros, we're not in the level of how things once were. But there are certain individuals that they were universal time, that no matter what time they would live in, even if they're the time of the prophets, there would be something unique. People like Rabbi Yehuda Chassid and the others that he spoke about, Rebbe Ezra Hanavi. Not sure who all these people are. Rebbe Ezra Hanavi, 33. He's brought down in a Taisvus Divra Maskell. Understand? He's brought down in a Taisvus and Gittin, so that's how we know he lived. Okay, so Vayimke, Haikvar in the Tachsar Nevu Bistro. So surely, either way, however you say it, prophecy has come back to the Jewish people. We're many years after that. So what if we're saying that the verse of that prophecy return to the Jewish people comes before the verse of the lion and the lioness, or the young lion that's going to stand up, and that's a sign of strength right before the coming of Moshiach? So the Rebbe says the Kaya Gula Lasid is surely ready for the Moshiach to come. So why hasn't the Moshiach come if prophecy has returned already 1,000 years ago? Because the Achshar Dara, the generation is not worthy yet. We're still going through the pains of Golus. The Rebbe says in Yiddish, Halt men sich noch als ein Matrin sich. We're still struggling. Schlepping. Matrin is like a Yiddish word for schlepping. We're schlepping through the Golus. The Rebbe says, Dairis la'achris kasher nasa karv yosel Mashiach, the bias of Mashiach, as we're getting closer to the coming of Mashiach, hari oida pama inin tachser nevu bistro. So the Rebbe seems to say that there's a break from that time to the times of now. Meaning that although there was great prophecy, and Ruach HaKodesh, it says in the Beis Medrash, I think he was talking about the Beis Medrash of the Ravid, that there was great prophecy in those days. There was a certain awakening. We know the Ramban went back to Eretz Yisrael, right? The Ramban came to Eretz Yisrael. There's the Ramban Shul in Yerushalayim. There was a great furia for Mashiach, and it wasn't Achshadar. The world wasn't ready yet. But now the Rebbe says there's going to be another revelation of prophecy that's going to come right before Mashiach comes. And where did that start from? The Rebbe says, Aidei Skalas Marena Baal Shem Tov. It started from the revelation of the holy Baal Shem Tov, V'Talmidov, and his students, Ad Rabbeinu Azokin, to the Alter Rebbe, Shalov Nemer, Lashon Hanal, Oidish Rabbi Yehuda Chassid. I was wondering about that. What they say about Rabbi Yehuda Chassid, that had he lived in the days of the Amaroim or the Tanoim of the Nevi'im, he would have been great even amongst those people. It says about the Alter Rebbe that had the Alter Rebbe lived in the times of the Talmudic scholars, the Mishnah scholars, or even the prophets, the Alter Rebbe would have been unique amongst any of of his peers. So again, we have the revelations of the Baal Shem Tov, the Alter Rebbe. The Rebbe continues, not just by the Alter Rebbe, but by the Mittel Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek, the Rebbe Marash, Rebbe Rashav, the Friedrich Rebbe, and our Rebbe, Adler, the Dairenu Zeh, Nisienu Kvoik, Dirs Marachami Admer. Until our generation, the Rebbe, Haboiker Or, we're holding the morning break of light. Dot Safed Yosef, it's the light of Joseph. You know, the Friedrich Rebbe was called Yosef. Kedisa b'Zohar, as it says in the Zohar, Vari Boiker Tzaf the Yosef Nemer Boiker Arach Lecha. There's going to be that morning that's going to come for the revelation of Moshiach. V'apirish the Arach Lecha Hukumeshakasef Arachti Ner Limshichi. I set up the candle, the light for my anointed one. As it says in the Zohar, Shezui Agula Shlema B'Meir Remeinu Adem Mashiach Tzedkenu, that this is the great redemption that's going to come with Mashiach. Again, we see the Farbrengens of Balak, of Bilam, is so powerful because a lot of the prophecies about Mashiach. And the Rebbe started to sing the song of Ani Mamin. Let's continue. So it looks like the footnotes in these on the Sicha is packed. It'd be worth to check them out later for those who can. Okay, let's continue. The Rebbe says we're going into now Yudal Tammuz. Today is Yudal Tammuz. It means tonight is Tezvav. So it says on the 14th of Tammuz, Dover Pam Oidis Mamar Azal, we once spoke about, but the rabbis have said, Mishenichnas Av Imate B'Simcha. Right? The Rebbe is already talking about Av, that when Av enters, we lessen joy. Sheyeshna Pirish Mimate Minyanim Elu B'Simcha Idei Simcha. So the Rebbe says that, what does it mean, Mimatim? So a Misnagid is going to say, well, it's time to be depressed, right? It's the month of Av. Mimatim B'Simcha, it says in the Shulchan Aruch. But the Rebbe says it's brought down another idea that Shemimatim B'Simcha, we're Mimatim in the things of negativity through happiness. That even though there's things that happen that are negative, how could you overcome the negativity? It's through happiness. Mimatim, the negativity of through Simcha. A person, now that we're entering the 3 weeks, Sunday starts the fast of Tammuz. So a person may ask themselves, how could I have Simcha? Even more Simcha when we're starting the 3 weeks and we're starting to mourn the destruction of the first and second temple. The Rebbe says that's only talking about once you reach the 3 weeks. But now that we're before the 3 weeks, Shabbos Kodesh and Shabbos, like this year, Shabbos is the 16th of Tammuz. The fast only starts on the 17th of Tammuz. And the Shabbos has all the days preceding it. Even though that year, the 17th of Tammuz was on Tuesday, this year's on Sunday. And therefore, there's no excuse. If you already reached the 3 weeks, you may question, where do you have the strength to have Simcha, to lessen the depression or the negativity of the 3 weeks? But you're before the 3 weeks, you have no excuse. So we have to build up reserves of Simcha. And the last few hours we have before the fast of Tammuz to be able to override the negativity of the 3 weeks. And we shouldn't even have to go into the 3 weeks. We should change those days to days of happiness and joy. Really, that shouldn't have to be based on reserve. It should be based on obvious. The Rebbe continues. The next Sicha, in chapter 7. He says like this, in the prophecy of Bilam we have, it says, from the top of mountains I see, umigvois, in the hilltops Asherenu. Surim Kayal Avis, when it says the mountains, who we're talking about? We're talking about the fathers. And Givois, in the hilltops, are the Imais, are the mothers. Like it says, Kol Doidi Medalig Alaharim Mekabetz Al-Gvois, like the voice of my beloved that jumps from the mountaintops and is skipping from the mountaintops and jumping from the hilltops. The Rebbe says it's obviously this Farbrengen, which the Rebbe Farbrengen on the 14th of Tammuz, was a follow-up to the Farbrengen he had a few days before on the 12th of Tammuz. He quotes it a few times. The Rebbe says, we spoke about in the Sicha, the Farbrengen of the 12th of Tammuz. This is the Gemara. We learned it in Sanhedrin, those who are in our Sanhedrin class, that Bilam Yatzim Lavan. Bilam is a descendant of our uncle, or grandfather for that matter, Lavan. Right? Lavan is the father of Leah and Rachel, so that would make him our grandfather, and he's also the uncle of Yaakov, right? Rivka's brother. Moshiach Bilam ben Ba'ar, the Torah tells us that his name is Bilam, the son of Ba'ar, or ben Ba'ar Mamish, either he is Ba'ar's son himself, meaning literally the son of Ba'ar, or ben Benai, or grandson of Ba'ar. And we know the Talmud, we just learned, the whole Talmud tells us that who is Ba'ar? Ba'ar is Lavan. So clearly Bilam is a descendant, either a grandson or a son of Lavan. You have to figure out the math of it, of course, because Lavan, when he died, we don't know, because as the Gemara also says, he lived in the time of the judges. He was a king in the time of the judges. He obviously lived a long time. But Baor, Lavan, according to the Talmud, only lived 50%. According to one opinion, only lived to 34. So and that means he was only born after the Jewish people left Egypt. Lavan says, here the Rebbe is a famous talk from the Rebbe. We'll go as far as we can in this talk. Lavan says, Abanis b'noisai v'abanim banai. What does Lavan tell Yaakov? Yaakov takes his family. He leaves Haran. He's going back home to Eretz Yisrael. His father Yitzchak, his mother Rivka has passed away on the way. And so what does Lavan say? How dare you take my family? Why? The daughters are my daughters. And your sons are my sons. So how do you say, what does he mean? Lavan claims, and whatever Lavan represents, both in holiness and unholiness, says that your children belong to me. Your daughters are my daughters, and your sons are my sons. Okay, that means he's claiming ownership of Yaakov's family. Okay, how do you nullify it? The claim of Lavan. Fantastic. So the Rebbe says, how do you break that? That his descendant Lavan, who claimed and seemingly didn't just claim an empty claim, he had what to claim, he had what the basis claim on. So to nullify that, the power of his claim is Bilam, who's his descendant, his son or his grandson, had to say, on the contrary, I see that they come from giants, they come from the fathers, they come from Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Rachel, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah, not from Laban. Because the fathers are the mountains and the mothers are the hilltops. Like I said, so the fact that we need Bilam to annul the claim is the claim has a claim. A claim that has no claim, you don't need any annulment of it, right? It's no claim. Not every time someone says something, you have to answer. The only time you need to address a claim is if the claim has a substance. So the Rebbe says the fact that we need Bilam to nullify Lavan's claim means that he had a yisod, he had a foundation, he had a claim. If he had no foundation, he had no basis for his claim to say that that the daughters are my daughters and your sons are my sons. I wouldn't mention it. So he said, not every foolish thing said by an anti-Semite has to be mentioned in the Torah. And we wouldn't need that Bilam, the descendant of Lavan, has to come and correct that claim. We find a similar situation, the Rebbe says. That when Yaakov battles the angel of Esav, and he wins, and he has him in a beer lock, and he says, "Let me go." He says, "I'm not going to let you go until you agree that I deserve the blessings." They give into Esav ira al brachas because Esav came, like the Torah says clearly in the end of Ayet of told us, and he says that Yaakov had no right to take the blessings from me. So who is this angel? That was the angel of Esav. So Yaakov needed that the claim should no longer be a claim because otherwise there was substance to the claim. Esav had a claim against Yaakov. He stole my brachas. It was so important that Yaakov get Esav's angel to concord, to agree that Yaakov deserved the blessings. So even though the angel says, God's waiting for me to say Shira, right? There's a Seder Lamaila, there's order above. Angels have to, each angel has its time to say something, to praise. Yaakov says, I don't care. I'm not letting go unless you get, I don't care if you have if you have an appointment with God. You're not leaving until you admit that I deserve the blessings. The angel had to say praise to God. And Yaakov says, I'm not letting you go until you bless me, until you agree. And Yaakov says, God will wait. It's not, you're not saying Shira until you agree. He needed that he should agree that Yaakov deserved the blessings. What did he tell him? You mastered Elohim, the limitations of Elohim, and with man, and you were successful. The Rebbe says, Lahar Shapirsh, the Sarisim Elohim, again, in all the Maimarim, what we see a lot of times is the Rebbe says things seemingly like kind of just alluding to ideas. These are deep ideas that are brought out in the different Maimarim on Parshas Balak. The idea of of Leira Avon B'Yakov, Lahibit Avon B'Yakov, Leira Amal B'Yisrael. We see in the Alter Rebbe and the Kutei Torah and the Middle Rebbe, these are verses that are referring to the battle between Yaakov and the angel. So the Rebbe says, "Ulaharish appears to Sarisim Elikim." What's the idea that he's a sar, he's a master over Elikim? Seemingly, like the Rebbe says, it's talking about that also angels are called Elikim, right? Bnei Elikim. What does it mean that? So what does it mean that Yaakov is a master over Elikim? That Yaakov, the Jewish people, are stronger than the angels. This also, it has to do with the prophecy that Bilam says. Not just that he agrees, but also that there's going to be prophecy. Yaakov says, and Yisrael is going to be effective. That what's going to be said, we're going to see clearly the love that God has for the Jewish people. Where is their place of the mechitza, their places of space, is lifnim malchei yashar is even more inner than the space of the angels. Lifnim in a pargud, where we have many times it says in the Talmud, it's referred to, that I heard from the other side of the pargud, the separation. The angels sometimes could hear what's being said on the other side of the separation. The separation separates them, but they could hear what's being discussed on the other side of the separation, right? Famous, it's brought down in the tefillah, the prayer for the 10 martyrs that died by the Romans, right? He said, I heard from the Machar Pargud, I heard from behind the curtain that this is your destiny. You have to die for Mesiras Nefesh, Akidush Hashem. So the angels on the other side of the Pargud, the separation. So there's another explanation that says that they're asking the Jewish people because the Jewish people know more, because we're on the inside of the separation. What's going on? Ma Paul Kel, what has God been effective? So now the Rebbe goes down. We have a few minutes, so we go as far as we can. The Rebbe says, so we know that Lavan has a claim. The question is, what is the claim? What is this claim that Lavan has, that your daughters are my daughters, your sons are my sons? So the Rebbe is like this. What Lavan is saying is, if your soul comes down to this world, and the way God made it is you have to be engaged and you have to be involved in material things. You can't fast, you have to pay your bills, you have to eat, you have to go out to the world of Gashmias. So Lavan says, yes, I know there's a meaning to this, there's a purpose to this, to go and engage and to take the engagement that we have in the physical material world and elevate to the mimavar, avoid the of elevation. However, there's a rule of thumb. When you engage with a manuval, with a lowly person, it brings you down. You become a menavel. When we rightly say, it's beneath you to engage this person. You ever heard that expression? It's beneath you to express. You're elevated. You're beneath you. It's beneath you to have this petty argument with this person. It lowers you down to their level. And so Lavan says it's very nice to say that there's a purpose in going down into this world, but you're in this world, and when you go down to this world, you get affected by the world. Even though it's not long term, like the prophet says in Yeshaya, for a little second I've left you, but it's a little second and it says aftich. Aftich means I've left you. You'll get out of it. It's going to be short lived in the bigger picture. But while you're there, you descended. It lowers you from your status. You're now dealing with. You're also wondering how you're going to pay your bills. You're also get involved in the pettiness of life, of the gashmis and the chumrias, the coarseness. But now you're no longer connected. So Lavan says, they're my kids. Let's be honest over here. The daughters are my daughters. The sons are my sons. Wake them up at night and ask them what they're thinking. Like in this week's parsha, the Atzi Shittim, they went down to Shittim. Even though it's just a shtus, it's not true, it's a foolishness. And not for us being affected by the foolishness. We're allowing the foolishness to overwhelm us. If you just use your holy intellect, or if you just use basic intellect, Seichel Abari of a healthy person, not a person overwhelmed, you would never think about that you're living in this world as a cutting off Melikus afilu zman katzit to cut yourself off from God even for a second. Because every second that you're disconnected is a second that's lost. And the next second's a new second. The laws of Talmud Torah. Like Tanya talks about when a person does tshuva, that even though you do tshuva and you get tshuva, but the time in the bigger picture never is frozen. And therefore that time that you've done in a disconnect, or chas v'shalom and avera, you can never be really bought back. Let's just see what that's, and then along those lines is the Taina of Lavan. There's a very tiny Lavan. Let's just say at least we can't leave with the question, right? So what's the answer? The Rebbe says that what Lavan is saying, he's presenting a false narrative. Why? Because when the fact is, when you're involved in worldly things, but your motivation, what's your agenda, is the godliness that you're going to get, that's being done over here. That every engagement you have is a way to make this a dwelling place for Hashem, is an experience for God to be revealed in this world. That's the only reason why you're involved in these worldly things. The Rebbe says that Lavan's giving a false narrative. We're not lowering ourselves. If our real intention is that a person's engagement in this world is for the purpose of holiness, that even though it may seem that we're involved in worldly things, but that itself is an elevation. It's an elevation from within. And obviously, the Rebbe is going to go into to explain this more in Avodas Hashem and how we should practicalize it. We should bring this into practice, and it's a shame we have to go, but the idea is we could learn on our own. Be'ezus Hashem. I want to wish everyone a good Shabbos. We shouldn't have to fast the fast of Tammuz. We should have the revelations of Moshiach today, with the coming of Moshiach. Good Shabbos, everyone. Take care.
Good Shabbos, everybody.